I'm just saying this has to be a priority if you want to have a healthy family, and you can choose not to do it. That's your choice. But if we don't know what our food is and we don't prepare our food consistently, you are going to be sick and your kids are going to be sick. So if that's not what you want, then we need to figure out, how do we prioritize this? How do we put it into our day? How do we find more time to cook? We all have choices of what we do. And so it's just got to be one of the choices. This is something that's super important if you want to have healthy kids.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson. Today we're joined by Dr. Joel Warsh, aka Dr. Joel Gator of the popular parenting Instagram account. Joel is a board-certified pediatrician in Los Angeles, California, who specializes in parenting, wellness, and integrative medicine. He's the author of Parenting at Your Child's Pace, the Integrative Pediatrician's Guide to the First 3 Years. In today's conversation, we're talking about what's going on with kids' health today and why chronic illness, including autoimmunity, is on the rise at a frightening pace. Best of all, we discuss what to do about it by addressing lifestyle factors in order to reverse the trend and create a healthier generation. Dr. Joel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
I'm so excited. First of all, you are, I think the first pediatrician who's been on the podcast. And if this were 20 years ago, people would be like, why would you have a pediatrician on an autoimmunity podcast? But it's not. So welcome. I'm excited for our conversation. I was just kind of gushing over you before I hit record that I just really appreciate your work and just the kind of openness you show up with for at least your audience on Instagram, which is where I know you from most. So I'm thankful you're here.
Well, thanks for having me on. And I guess it's good to be here, but I guess not so good. I mean, well, I hear what you're saying. And I guess, of course, it is actually useful, unfortunately, because of what's going on.
Well, and so we need these conversations so that we can change the trajectory a little bit. So, but I would love to find out how, I was just saying, audience listeners know my kids are grown. But how did you get into this integrative, what I would call kind of functional medicine approach to pediatrics?
Yeah, most people get into integrative medicine, I think, because they had some sort of life thing that happened to them, health complication, and medical system really helped them. And then they found something else. That wasn't really my story. I mean, I'm luckily been pretty healthy, knock on wood. But for me, when I was going through training, I got really frustrated with medications for everything and seeing a million patients all the time and seeing kids getting sicker and sicker, and also seeing people go outside of the system and getting better and starting to wonder what that is. Also meeting my now wife at that time, who's very holistic minded too. So all these things really open up my eyes to what else is out there. And once you step outside the regular medical system a little bit, you start to realize like, oh, this is not that woo. This is not crazy. Like, why are we not thinking about food? Of course, these things make sense. Like, there's nothing that woo. I mean, you can get pretty woo-woo if you go into integrative medicine, but that's not what it is. I mean, not for the most, really just thinking about the foundations. And so that's really what led me into integrative medicine, because there was no way to go back. I know you're asking before about Dr. Gator. So that's my wife's last name, actually. It's Intelligator. And people thought that was funny. So it kind of stuck. It's not a Florida thing. Everyone thinks it's a Florida thing. Nothing against Florida. I grew up in Toronto, but it's a wife thing.
That's funny. I know. I was confessing. I was like, oh, no, your real name was Dr. Warsh. So, and it is true. Kind of once your eyes are opened, you really can't. I mean, your box got bigger, right? Why would you go back smaller? And I was kind of giggling because for the past 20 plus years, I've lived in Colorado, and I lived right outside of Boulder, moved from originally the Northeast via Florida to Colorado, and really thought whether, woo-woo, granola, just a lot of the lifestyle in Boulder. I'm not talking about the marijuana or just 20,
healthy living.
20 years ago, healthy living, real food, raw milk, like these things that I remember thinking like, these people are nuts. And I remember, the more I learned and have evolved, it's like, oh, no, they were right. So yeah, you can get as woo-woo or whatever, but there is a natural state that humans are supposed to be in, which leads me to one of the reasons I was so excited about our conversation, is because not only autoimmunity, but yes, autoimmunity, all kinds of chronic health challenges are on the rise in kids in astounding numbers. In the 90s, I worked at a university that had a school for autistic children. It was rare back then, right? Now it's not rare. So what is going on here?
Yeah, I think it is really important to set the stage for what we're seeing these days, especially for those that don't have kids or really aren't, in the loop on it. Because I think it's all relevant regardless of whether we talk about kids, because it's really very similar
humans
for adults and kids and humans. And, when we talk about kids and we talk about the stats, like you talk about autism, back 50 years ago, 100 years ago, it was like 1 in 25,000, 1 in 1,000. Then it was dropping to 1 in 100. Now it's like 1 in 36 or so is statistics, 1 in 22 in California. So like those numbers are increasing at a staggering rate. Autoimmune conditions, basically everyone is going through the roof. A lot of things we never saw in kids, we're seeing in kids now. I mean, the easiest example to really drive that point home is diabetes, right? I mean, type 2 diabetes called adult onset diabetes because you didn't see it in kids ever, when you even for me in my career, I'm not like that old or anything, but I
You're not old at all.
It wasn't something that you really talked about like even 10 or 15 years ago in kids because it's more of a lifestyle thing. And we all kind of accept that for type 2 diabetes. It's like, if you change up your diet, if you're not eating that healthy, if you move a little bit more, we can see those numbers improve. We can, not consider ourselves to have that condition anymore most of the time. But that used to be for adults. Now the average age of onset is 13 and 33% of kids have diabetes or pre-diabetes. 50% of kids are overweight or obese. The autoimmune condition numbers, if you want to include like, just all the different things that we're seeing, but then also anxiety, mental health, depression, asthma, allergies. I mean, all of these things that were very rare. Of course, they existed before, but they were very rare. And yes, some people want to point to we're better at diagnosis. Of course, we are. We are better at diagnosis. So that's a small part of it. But you don't go from
it's a really small part,
25,000 to 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 in a couple of decades. That the way we're diagnosing this hasn't changed that much in the last 20 years. I mean, it certainly has changed in the last 50 years, but that's not what's going on. That's just a small part of it. What is going on is our lifestyle is so crappy and not built in the way that we're meant to live. And so for kids especially, but adults too, we're not getting the nutrients that we need. We're being exposed to so many chemicals and toxins. At some point, our body cannot handle that. And then it falls off a cliff and it expresses itself in different ways, depending on your genetics, depending on your environment. And that might be an autoimmune condition, that might be autism, that might be a mental, whatever it is. I think it just expresses itself in different ways.
Sure.
And that's a lot of what we're seeing. Absolutely. I'm just, stepping back. There are some genetic conditions. There are some things which have, probably very little to do with environment, but you can still improve your environment and help your symptoms. But I think the majority of what we're seeing and the majority of this explosion is because of our environment, because our genetics haven't changed that much in the last 50, 100 years.
Right. And I love that you highlight that. Even if you have genetic predispositions for things, we can modify those lifestyle factors and turn that back off, or as you said, improve symptoms so that they become like a non-event. I love that you pointed out with diabetes. That's kind of the easiest one. I hear it all the time. Well, my mom has diabetes and my grandma had and it's like, okay, are y'all eating together though? Mm-hmm. Curious. Right. And do you live together? It's not necessarily genetics, just because a family shares it.
We have to expand the definition. Like, you work with and talked about a lot of autoimmune conditions. And I think we need to expand that type 1 and type 2 to almost all of these conditions, including autism, because I think there are some versions of a lot of these things that are, very much a genetic component. And then there are other versions of it that are a very small genetic component. Maybe you're a little more susceptible, but it's the lifestyle that pushes it over the edge. And I think if we separate in that way, we can take our power back and we can start to call, like type 2 celiac disease, type 2 autism, like whatever it is, right? I mean, I think that there is certainly a huge lifestyle component for many people. And if you can kind of separate that out, then maybe we're going to take our power back, as opposed to being like, well, I guess it's just the way that it is. I guess I'm just sick. Take this medicine.
It's defeating. And as a parent, and my kids, shocker, while I was in the midst of my decline with rheumatoid arthritis and all my other diagnoses, my kids started getting diagnosed with things, right? And so it is about empowerment. That's why we're having the conversation. And it's not about shaming or finger pointing. Or one of my favorite things working with parents of young children is the downstream effect, right? If I'm working with a mom to reverse her symptoms or get, as much under control as possible, my grand hope, and should be, is that her kids aren't going to be seeking out somebody like me in their adulthood to backtrack and correct the things that set the spiral in motion to begin with. Mm-hmm. And that's exciting. That is empowerment. And so as a parent, you want to know, like, okay, to me, the diagnosis is the label for the symptoms. Right. Like none of it answers the question, why is this happening? Right. And so it is empowering as a parent to be able to say, I can help my kid. Mm-hmm. And it always, it's interesting. I'm guessing you see this with parents a lot too. Oh, it's hard. Oh, my kids aren't going to eat that way. Mm-hmm. Oh, my kids don't, whatever, fill in the blank. And it's like, actually, you're the parent. Right. If that's the food on the table, like they may skip the first meal, they're going to eat. Mm-hmm. We're animals when it comes down to it. When we get hungry, we're going to eat what's there. Mm-hmm. And it's not a punishment for kids to eat, I don't think, to eat real food and learn to nourish their bodies.
No, it's absolutely not. And that's called parenting. I mean, we have to get back to it. We have to have some boundaries within reason. And like what you said is exactly true. And I definitely echo that often, because, we're not trying to punish our kids with their food by saying like, oh, you can never have a snack. No, we're trying to give them healthier versions of foods that they like. And that means some experimentation, some figuring out what will work. But it doesn't mean you have to go from chips to broccoli. It means that you're going to get a bag of chips, you read the ingredients, you pick the better bag of chips. Right. Maybe get rid of the really crappy, cookies and Oreos and Doritos and whatever. And there are a lot of other versions of things out there. And there's also a lot of other snack food that you can purchase, make, that's, quite healthy. And they're going to love it too. They might fight you at first, but if it's actually really good, they're not going to fight you. If they, maybe they're going to love carrots and peanut butter or something. Like I don't know what it is they're going to love.
Middle of the road.
You can find them good food that's a lot more
nutritious. Make them an ant log.
And that's our job. Like our job is to keep them healthy, to make them resilient. And it doesn't matter that you're, I get it. People are busy. Things cost money. Like that's all true. But we want to have healthy kids. So we have to prioritize our health as well. And if it's not part of the equation, then our kids are going to be sick. And that's just how it is. I mean, 1 out of 2 kids have a chronic disease right now. And if you're okay with that, then it's fine. If everyone can make their own choices of what they want to do. But if you don't, then you want to give your kids the best chance to be healthy. The world is, a toxic place to begin with. There's only so much that we can work with. So we have to do what we can within what we can do. And that is the part that's up to us. And it makes a huge difference because the little things add up. It's not like one piece of cake is going to be the end of the world, give you an autoimmune condition. But if you're eating the dye, the chemical over 10 years, then that adds up in your body. Add that with every other thing. And eventually they can't handle it. But if you start to take away a few of those things, our bodies are amazing. They can handle a lot. And that's what they do.
Yeah, it's always this tipping point, right? So it doesn't mean, I always say, perfection doesn't really exist and it's not sustainable. It's that you mentioned the word foundation. And I do believe that is our job as parents, is to create foundations, whether it's health, faith, just values, all of it. Then they go out, mine are all adults, they've made their own choices. Those foundations are still really evident. And I like, people think I joke, I was not born a health coach, right? Like people are like, oh my gosh, you used to eat junk food? Yes, I used to eat junk food. I used to eat stuff that I would never put in my mouth now because I know better.
Right.
I'm not saying that wouldn't, it probably wouldn't taste good, but it did taste good at the time. So we go through this. I went through, and you work with a lot of parents. When my oldest was diagnosed with celiac, that became, when he was 12, that became the beginning of my actual healing journey. Shocker, because we changed the food in the house. And I remember like literally feeling guilty that he was a middle school boy, hardest time of his life, maybe, hopefully, at least, and that he wasn't going to be able to eat the Oreos and the crap, right? I literally did. And we were just talking about it at family dinner on Sunday. I had a gluten bin because I felt like, well, it wasn't fair to the other two. They don't have celiac. And now I'm like, what they tease me all the time. They're like, thanks for like continuing to give us the poison, or I'll work with parents who they'll get, the grass-fed meat for themselves and give their kids and I'm like, wait, I don't understand. Don't you love your children? So we need to let go of the guilt that we're creating change for children. That's one of the reasons I get so excited about what you do, because I think, oh my gosh, if people can learn this before they get pregnant, even, then they're just there. It's just a home run. I'm not saying nobody will ever get sick, but
right. No, and that's exactly why I wrote the book for the age range that I did, because I just came out with Parenting at Your Child's Pace, and it's a book for 0 to 3-year-olds. And I get asked a lot about like, why did I choose that age range? Why didn't I go farther? And I mean, there's just so many questions that new parents have, but a big focus of what I wanted to do, and one of the reasons I got into pediatrics in the first place, was to help kids prevent disease. It's not what's going on in medicine these days. Everything is treatment, and treatment is great. I mean, we need treatments too, but we have to prevent these things so they don't end up in our offices. They don't end up needing an autoimmune coach. So they don't end up needing an integrative practitioner, or whatever. I think we're trying to get ahead of it. And so
an integrative practitioner is just what we think of as a practitioner.
Our goal should be, let's talk about how we build a healthy child, build a resilient child. Let's talk about the foundation, so that way you can set that up from day one. So you're going to minimize their risk to be sick. No matter what you do, you can be the healthiest person in the world. You can still get sick. You can still get cancer. These things happen. You could be the least healthy person in the world and smoking and drinking every day and live to 120. These things happen. But
my grandmother perfectly pickled herself. Like literally, she was pickled, preserved, like just, and not sick. Just,
but for most people, for most kids, if you live the regular American way, you're going to have a chronic condition. You're going to be on multiple medications. If you don't live that way, you won't. I mean, we know this. We know this pretty clearly. We can look at the places around the world that live the longest, that are the healthiest. I mean, we know what that involves, and yet we're not doing it. And therefore it is up to us to start to take back our control. And again, like you said, it's not about shaming. It's not about blaming. It's not about feeling bad. It's not about feeling overwhelmed. I try to minimize stress when I talk. I try to minimize overwhelm, because it's not about everything. It's just about making conscious choices to be healthy, to start learning about some of this stuff, to start making choices with this in mind and prioritizing your health, and one little thing at a time, wherever you are. If you never cook a meal a week. If you cook 1 meal a week, cook 2 meals a week. If you never buy organic, try to buy a couple of things organic. If you don't know anything about the stuff on labels, start reading the labels, start to learn one thing. Like whatever it is that you're doing, as long as you're moving forward, then that is going to be the key. And every little bit helps, because whatever you do might be more than enough to keep your kids healthy. And the more that you do, the better. But we don't have a PhD in chemistry or, biology or food science. So we don't know everything. That's fine. You don't need to, but you do know how to read a label and look at a word and see it's a real word versus a word you don't know. You can look at a label and see this is more sugar than that thing. What kind of sugar? It's like these things we can all do, and it adds up. It adds up over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That matters.
It does. It does. Amen. Reading labels, like that's always to me the first step. My daughter she just did it again. I was like my proudest mom moment when she was in high school, my youngest. And she called me because she and her friends had run to the grocery store for lunch, and she had found, something she wanted to eat. And then she read the label and she called and said, well, thanks for ruining my life. Now I can't eat it. I don't want it.
Right, but that is the goal, right? And
yes.
Before it, you said it's not about punishing them. It's about teaching them. You want them to learn healthy versus not healthy, good habits in terms of reading labels and learning about things. So that way, when they go out in the world, when they're older, when they're in college, when they're out working in the world, they're going to do the same thing. And they're going to, it might be different things at that point. Who knows what food's going to be like in 20 years or what we're going to be reading, but you're going to be conscious of this pattern of what I'm putting in matters. It matters for my health. And therefore I should think about it. And I can be the weird friend, I'm not the weird one. I'm the healthy one, but and if the more kids that do that, the more that other people do it, the more that companies are going to be forced to make better products, because if people are not buying stuff with crap in it, then they're not going to make it anymore. They're not going to go out of business.
Right. And that is key. And you mentioned, like, it doesn't have to be that hard. And there are up-level trades at the grocery store that weren't there, 20 years ago, 18 years ago. You couldn't, I don't think, find a quote unquote a healthier, I'll say, bag of chips at the store now. Now you can. So it's not about everybody has to spend 20 hours in the kitchen, even if you never cooked before. So I love our approaches are very similar. It's like one thing, and start with something doable, like get the easy win and then start building momentum.
All about momentum. And you mentioned about cooking, like, let's be in the kitchen for 20 hours if we can. Like, that is useful.
Absolutely.
And I know you meant that. I'm just saying, that's where we need to go, right? Because
but not day one.
Not day one. Like, our goal from day one of someone who's never cooking is to be like, all right, you're going to cook every meal from now on. That's not practical. But we do have to acknowledge that a big important part of humanity and healthy lifestyle is knowing all the ingredients, picking great ingredients, loving our food, loving where it comes from, and then getting that food and then preparing it with our family, for our family, whatever it is. Like, that is a big part of human health. And that is gone. Like, it is so gone from the last few generations because we're all about faster, cheaper, quicker, and you lose so much. So no, you don't have to do 20 hours right away. But if you want to be healthy, look around the world at the blue zones, right? You can look at grandmas who are like 102 and they have bigger muscles than me because they're in the kitchen all day, just like, rolling and working. And it's like, they're not going to the gym. They're just cooking for their and living and having real food. They're walking up and down the hills. They're out in the farm. Like, that's what we always did as humans. Most people were cook the food, and now, like, nobody does that anymore. Speaking, and we live a very sedentary lifestyle, and we don't know where our food comes from, and it's mostly crap. And even in the best case scenario, we're not preparing it. So how is it possible that we're going to be healthy if we don't give ourselves good nutrients and we're not moving? Like, one of the best ways to do that is to start cooking again, because then you actually realize what is in your food. And if your kids like chicken nuggets, doesn't mean you have to never give them chicken nuggets, but instead of buying the packaged one or the one you make,
I have a great recipe. It's super easy.
Right. And like, okay, maybe even the chicken nuggets you're making are not the best thing in the world, but it's probably 10,000 times better than the chicken nuggets you're from the grocery store, from the fast food store. So you're getting a huge net positive, even if it's not like the best food you could ever give them, maybe, but like it's a win from where you were. And that's what we have to work towards, because that's what matters.
Amen. And also, I don't know, they're going to eat what you're giving them. So if they only want chicken nuggets, it's because you've only been giving them chicken nuggets.
Right.
I never had I don't know, were there chicken nuggets when I was a kid? I never had one. I don't know until, my kids were asking. So, you touched on, we start talking about food always, because so much of what we eat and we're giving kids isn't, I don't even think, definable as food, and the body certainly doesn't recognize it as food. So it's the low hanging fruit. It's so important. It's become so adulterated, and it's so easy to control once you learn and take those steps. But another really big thing that you just mentioned, because I was thinking, well, yeah, and when you cook, when kids grow up in a cooking home, They learn to cook. Like it's a life skill. And but you mentioned something else, which also is, I believe, part of the wellness level in the blue zones too, is community and connection, right? When you didn't say just cooking, you said cooking together as a family, right? And I remember back when my kids were tiny, the reading about the importance of sitting down at the dinner table together. Like even then, and my oldest is about to turn 29, things had already shifted, right? Where people were sticking the kids already in front of the TV with dinner or whatever happened to that we even needed to discuss, sit down as a family at dinner. And so I do think within the family and outside of the family as well, this sense of community, at least in our country, is something that has also I don't want to say faded away, but it needs a little more intention now to create. And I believe is a really important part of wellness.
I think so. I mean, mental health is a disaster right now. And a big part of that is feeling isolated. A lot of people don't have family around. They're so busy with their work. Both, partners, parents are working. I mean, there's just so many things that we're doing and we're so stressed and we're always moving. And, you look at the majority of people that seem much happier, like it's just family time. They're just having family cookouts and they're, sitting down together and they're spending time and they're slowing down and they're kind of tuning out of their screens and all of these things that it's not rocket science. I mean, you want that stability for your kids. These are the things that really are, I think, very important for us and our kids. And we really moved to like, all right, we got to get going, got to get this done, faster dinner. We were marketed to. I mean, we were marketed to for many, many years about faster, quicker, cheaper, better.
Right.
And just not true. What you lose with faster, quicker, cheaper is health. Right. And it's great that we have some of this stuff because sometimes you need a snack on the go. Sometimes, you just can't cook. Sometimes, these are things that you are with our modern lifestyle, but fine. But that should be more the minority than the everyday. Yes. And I don't know, I just think cooking is such a vital part of our lives, and we lost it and we have to get it back. And just one other point on, you're talking about the family cooking. We have to be a little humble here as parents. And I say this to parents all the time, like, you might not be a good cook. Right. That might be the reason why your kids don't eat, or maybe you never learned, a lot of our parents didn't really teach us because it just wasn't that important. And that's okay. But we're really lucky. We have a lot of resources. There are cooking classes. There's an internet, you can learn how to do some things. And if your kids don't want to eat your food, then maybe it's not that the food that is healthier is actually bad. Maybe you're just not preparing it in a way that they like. And that's okay. Like, this is just another learning. It's such an important life skill that we lost and we have to get it back.
I love that. And if the kids are in the kitchen, because I have seen this too.
I love it.
And the parent isn't a great cook, the kids tend to learn really quickly to become good cooks.
Especially with the younger kids that are toddlers, a little older than toddlers or whatever. Like, they love to help in the kitchen. Yes. They love to help cooking, pour things, whatever. I mean, that's such a great family activity that it's like, you don't even, you're just making dinner, but you're doing it together. And you're teaching them how to cook, but you're also spending time together, which is the thing they value most. So
I will say, because I do remember this, is that was kind of the height of like my fatigue and my pain, and it will take longer to prepare the meal. There will be a little more cleanup, but you can't even put a price on the value of having the kids in the kitchen, really.
Right. And that just goes back to priorities, right? I mean, because the first thing that when you talk about this, that people yell back is like, oh, I just don't have the time. I'm so busy.
Yes.
Oh, there's, single moms. Okay, I get it. There are situations where it's really tough to do. But that doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. You have to prioritize it. I certainly understand in certain situations that, like, you're not gonna be able to do it. You're not gonna be able to do it every day. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying this has to be a priority if you want to have a healthy family, and you can choose not to do it. That's your choice. But if we don't know what our food is and we don't prepare our food consistently, you are going to be sick and your kids are going to be sick. That's just how it works. So if that's not what you want, then we need to figure out, how do we prioritize this? How do we put it into our day? How do we find more time to cook? Because
create more time.
We all have choices of what we do. And so it's just got to be one of the choices. This is something that's super important if you want to have healthy kids. And that may not be the choice that's possible for everyone. I get that. But for the majority of people, that has to be a priority. And most people can a lot, an extra hour a week, an extra 30 minutes a week, an extra whatever a week to make a few more meals. Or even if you can, one day of the week, even if that's all the time you have, like on Sunday, you make a big batch of a bunch of food and you in the fridge for a couple of days, and at least it's prepared food for 3 or 4 days out of the week instead of 0.
Yeah. And one of my tips with that is, like, if you're doing big batch stuff, like, make a double batch and freeze portions. And then you're not cooking, but you're eating good, real homemade food every day.
Right.
So
Exactly.
there are ways. We have ways. Once, like you said, once you acknowledge that this is a priority, you'll find the way, and it is a process. But I look back and I'm like, wow, luckily I did always, even in pain and tired, I'd always cooked, and I can, and yet still my kids, we also ate a bunch of junk. So still my kids ended up having to relearn better habits. So it's kind of whatever that first step is, like you said, if you don't cook at all, then cook something. Yeah. So what are some of those other, what we would call modifiable lifestyle factors? Food obviously is huge. Community, which there's never, it's always interesting. Like, there's not an order, a hierarchy. I mean, food we need the nutrients. So that's there. But what are other things either that you think are different now? Again, like, just contributing to this explosion of illness in children.
I think, there's a bunch, but the 2 other big ones would be toxins and movement or exercise. So I'm going to start with movement because I think it's a little easier. It's like, obviously we're just not moving. We're meant to move. Again, going back to the blue zones, like we talked about it, they just move. That's just their life. Right. They're not going to the gym. They're just walking and cooking and farming. And we have taken that out of our life, and we have to put it back in. We have to find ways to move, because it's really easy not to. It's really easy to sit at a desk, be in front of a computer, get in a car. You don't have to move. And there are ways that you can incorporate some of that back in your life, like going on walks every day with the family. After dinner, before dinner, you can, if you're taking your kids to school, park a couple blocks away and walk. If you're going places, take the stairs instead of the elevator. They're just extra things that you can do to add in a bunch more steps in the day, because we're already, no matter what, going to be below what we probably should be doing for most people. And so it's not, it's great if you want to get your kids at a gym or get them into sports. These things are really good, of course, but they're 1 hour here or there. Like it's the low grade movement, I think, that's really key to long-term health, because it's not something that we're like scheduling in. Right. I think it's fine to do that, but we just have to be moving more, because that's what our bodies need consistently. So that's one big piece. And then the toxins is the other big piece. Obviously a huge topic, but to me, where I tend to focus are the big things that we have that we can change quite easily in the home, because that's where we spend so much of our time. And so I usually mention things like, okay, we breathe a lot, right? So let's think about the air. We can't change the air outside, but you can get some plants for your home. You can get an air filter. These are easy things that you can do to just improve things a little bit. You drink water at home, let's say, hopefully, and maybe you're drinking tap water. If you're drinking tap water in a city where the tap water is not so good, then make sure you're getting a filter, or make sure you're getting bottled water, glass if you can. But these are things, again, if you're drinking your tap water every day, like that's a lot of chemicals, especially in most cities. So where do you spend your money? Well, I'd get a good filter if that's what you're going to be doing. Important. Everything that you're buying, just like with food, read the labels on everything, all the products you put on your skin and your children's skin, all the bedding that you have, all the, you're buying new furniture, whatever it is that you're getting, like think about health, try to get the most eco-friendly, natural products that you possibly can within your budget, because all things are sprayed in chemicals, and there's all sorts of things that everything is sprayed in these days. So if you can get something with the most minimal chemicals that you can, you're decreasing those things that you're breathing in all day.
Yeah. And the fun part, the exciting part, if you're like super geeky, like I am, is you can find stuff now. Again, like even 7 years ago, the home I'm in right now, I built, and, remember like looking specifically for, furniture that wasn't going to be off-gassing. And I drove the builders crazy, all the subs that my electrician was like, we don't don't put incandescent lights in anymore. And I'm like, well, you are in this house. Like, it's okay. So any choice, but I want to highlight what you said, like with obviously air, water, but even when you start with your products, like there are certain things, I like laundry detergent is the first product I have people look at because everything that you touches your laundry detergent.
Mhm.
So sometimes the impact, that big bang for the buck, like you can make one change and it is a really huge impact. And air and water, like all day long. And teaching your kids to drink water if they don't drink water instead of juices and soda. Let's not go there. But like just again, I'm not saying never treat, but like if they're dumping juice into their body all day, don't wonder why they end up with diabetes. Like it's just we like jumped over logic somewhere. And so it's really just getting back to nature and logic. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. All of this stuff is so basic and common sense in general,
Right.
but we're so confused by big companies, big corporations, because they're doing that on purpose and they want things that are cheaper. Because again, their goal as a company, I've said this many times, is to make money. If you are a corporation, your job as CEO is to make more money this quarter than last quarter. It's not a nefarious thing. I'm sure sometimes they do nefarious things, but mostly it's not nefarious. Mostly it's just they want to make more money. So their job is to figure out, what do I do to get you to buy my product the most and keep buying my product? It's not about how do I keep you healthy. They don't care, right? They don't care. If it's a byproduct of it, great. I mean, smaller companies, sometimes they think about that because they want you to get their products and buy eco-friendly products. But big companies don't care. That's not their job to care. It's our job to push back. We're doing a terrible job at it. And that's why we are where we are, because we're letting them kind of run things and market to us and confuse things and put in chemicals and products that we just know are not healthy for us, because it's not that complicated. If it's a real thing, if it's a real product, if it's fresh, that's good for you. All these synthetics and chemicals are probably not good for you. I mean, maybe they're not all terrible for you, but they're probably not good for you. So if you just simplify and go back to basic stuff, then like what we did forever, probably going to work just fine. And we like with food, we just way overcomplicated it. It's like you eat real food, fruits, veggies, meats that are, fish, whatever it is that unless you're vegan, things that are real food that are living in the real way, not mass produced, and you'll be fine. Like you don't need to think about diets or all these other things. Just eat real stuff and you cook it and prepare it. That's what everybody did forever. And you don't need to know anything more. If you're buying something for your home, like, what is a real product that wasn't sprayed in a bunch of crap? That's going to be better for you than something sprayed in a bunch of crap. Even if they say that it's healthy or it's not toxic.
Healthy crap. No thanks.
They're not going to tell you something's toxic until you see them for 10 years. So most of the stuff's probably not good for you.
Yeah. I love that. And again, it doesn't mean you have to live, totally on the edge and be, and I know people that do. I know people that only use candlelight as when the sun goes down. And although then we could talk about their burning candles. So I don't know. But there is this middle of the road. And I love our philosophy is the same about if you make your home your haven, if you're cooking your food and your air is clean and your water is purified and you're not bombarding with chemicals, you're being thoughtful about your choices in your home, that creates that resilience that we were talking about. We can't live in a bubble, obviously, and we don't want our kids to have to live in a bubble. But if we can control our exposures at home, we can take a little more of that hit out in the outside world. And that's what we're going for, is resilience.
For sure. And again, you mentioned, I just echo it again. It's not about doing everything. It's not about doing everything right now. It's not about being overwhelmed. You just start from today. If you've never done it, most people probably following you have done some stuff, but just what can I do? What can I do next? It doesn't have to be everything. Like if your, financial means are not the best, there are lots of things you can do that are cheaper. Like you can change out your cleaners for water and vinegar or baking soda. Like there are things that you can do. Like you mentioned, changing out your soap. You don't have to buy a more expensive soap, just a better soap. And would I actually use real soap? But it could be cheaper. You just get some real soap.
And you don't have to make it either. I did that one time, like,
Yeah, you
like
can.
10 years ago.
Like you can, but we have this stuff now. So just find a local producer, go to some place that they make it themselves or whatever, and just, buy it. Like these are things that you can do, and you change out some of these things one thing at a time. And as you buy new things, you just buy them with more thought this time. And everything just kind of snowballs in a good direction.
I love that. I really do. Even I had this conversation earlier in the week with a client who made the comment about, her grocery bill. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. What's your restaurant bill? Because they used to eat out all the time, and so we really let's also be honest with, if you're going to be spending a little more at the grocery store, are you skipping the drive-through line? Are you getting did you drop the $7, if you want to even call it, coffee in the morning? We tend not to pay attention to that kind of spending, but we see our grocery bill. And so it does tend to balance out as you start to bring things back into the home. But like you said, it's one little thing at a time.
Right. And yes, like grocery bills are going up. And if you want to eat healthy, you're going to have a higher grocery bill. I mean, there's no question of it. And that's not...
Grow a little food.
People push back on that. And I'm like, okay, fine. Yes, it's more expensive, but where should you spend your money? Like, where should you spend your money? That to me is the priority. If that's not your priority, so be it. But to me, within your budget, whatever that is, that's where I prioritize a lot. And I would sacrifice some other things for healthier food. And that doesn't mean that if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you have to go to an organic farm and, have $500 grocery bills every week with the best food in the world. Like, that's not what I'm saying. It's just whatever you can prioritize, whatever you can afford. That's where I would put my focus. And then when you're working with a budget, then become a mindful, savvy consumer and figure out, okay, where can I get the best products for the cheapest? You can even order things from places directly. You cut out the middleman, and you don't always have as much choice because they're going to send you a box or whatever, but you're going to get a whole bunch of actually like super duper fresh food, and it'll be cheaper than if you get it at the store because there is no store. Like, kind of things exist if you're willing to do it.
Yeah. So I agree with the just get started and then, bring creativity in if you need to or want to. I love there's companies now that have like the uglies. They have the veggies that aren't pretty enough to go in the store shelf, but they're organic and they're delicious. And so there's lots of options once you set your priorities, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned the word overwhelm, which I joke. I used to always overwhelm my clients in the very beginning because we would jump in with food and, do a lot of things. What are you seeing, like, from that pediatric lens of the impact of stress on kids these days?
I mean, I think it's just everybody, right? Stress is so high. We're putting more pressure and stress on kids than ever. And of course, if you're constantly stressed, and that's going to affect your immune system and your body. And it's one of the other big factors. We didn't really talk about it too much, but it's one of the other big factors, I think, in all these autoimmune conditions. I mean, the chronic stress throws your body off. It throws your hormones off. It throws your immune system off, and it puts you at a disadvantage with everything. And eventually, if your hormones are off for long enough time, I think that's another big factor in chronic disease.
Thank you. I just wanted to not leave it unsaid, because I dealing with it with the adults, right? But I joke. I don't know if it made me a better mom or a worse mom, but I could see the pressure put on kids, my kids, at such a younger age. I remember when one of my kids was like a freshman in high school and having like this major, he was dealing with anxiety. And it come to find out, when I finally got him to open up, it was because he was going to an IB high school. So, good, it was geared toward go-getters. And basically they had told, the message the kids were receiving was, by now you should know what you want to do with the rest of your life, like where you're going to college, what. And I was like, whoa, no, and I really feel like as a mom, which was not common, but I found myself saying, like, it's okay. Like nobody cares, yeah, if you have a specific goal to go to a certain college, I'll support you in doing what you need to do. Right. Or even in college, it was like, nobody's looking at your undergrad grades. Like you don't need a 4.0 plus in college to do anything you want to do. Like reel it in a little bit. But I do feel like it's like a pressure cooker from such an early age now. That I just wanted to see, like, is that what you're seeing?
I think there's a lot of thinking way far ahead for kids. It's like, oh,
isn't that considered anxiety?
Oh, I want them to get into Harvard, so therefore they need to do these things. So therefore we need to get them in these programs. We need to get them in this school. Okay, well, if I get them in that school, then I have to get them in this grade school. Oh, I want to get in that grade school. I got to get them in this kindergarten, and you're like putting pressure when they're 4 to go to Harvard. And it's like, okay, well, like
what if they want to be a farmer?
That's not going to be there anymore, or maybe you're not going to care. Right. Or maybe they can want to get in and they accept, a couple % of people, regardless of how good they are. So maybe you should enjoy your life because that may not be what they want to do anyways. And, a lot of people get in because they're actually interesting and do unique things and not follow that exact path. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't strive to get into a good school or something that's what you want.
No, I didn't mean it that way.
I know you don't. I'm not saying
I think
key for parents.
I think it used to be parental stress that now is put on the kids, where it used to just be, the parent quietly being up in the middle of the night saying, oh, is my kid going to do the things? Or
I think there's just so much pressure and so much competition for some of these things now. Yeah. And, with social media and seeing everybody and every other thing going on, that you put pressure, they put pressure, and there's just a lot of pressure on things that are so unimportant or don't end up being a problem anymore. And it's just so constant. And again, stress is good a little bit, but not in the way that we're doing. And it's just such a crazy, crazy time of stress when there's no need a lot of the time to be worried about these things in the way that we are and the amount that we are. So yeah, I think we need to dial it back a little bit.
Thank you for that. Amen. So we're at the point in the conversation where listeners are leaning in because they know I'm going to ask you for one step. We already prefaced anything we're talking about for kids goes for adults or vice versa, because we're all humans, right? So you can gear it to whomever you want. But one step that listeners can start to take today to improve health.
I would say, again, reading labels. I think that's the biggest key. That's a really easy thing to do. And from now on, when you purchase anything, you're flipping it over, you're reading the label, you're looking at the label, and you're seeing what's in it. And once you start to at least acknowledge the stuff that's in things, you're going to be like, oh, wait, I don't want to buy that. Even if you don't know that much about it, you can look at it and be like, well, that doesn't sound like it should be in there.
I can't pronounce that. Well, thank you so much. For people that are listening on the go and aren't going to check out the show notes, where is the best place to find you?
So the best places to find me would be on Instagram or X at Dr. Joel Gator. Or if you do have a young child or pregnant, then Parenting at Your Child's Pace is the book. And you can go to, wherever books are sold, or parentingatyourchildspace.com.
Awesome. And I actually think we should all read it anyway, even if our kids are older. It's just good information and advice. So
thank you.
Dr. Joel Gator, Dr. Joel Warsh, however we find you, thank you so much for giving us amazing gold today.
Thank you.
For everyone listening, remember you can get those transcripts and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.